I served 26 years as a lineman for Georgia Power. My knees crackle like bacon every time I get out of bed. My back doesn't bend right anymore, and the arthritis in my fingers makes it hard to even button my shirt. But I'm proud. I'm proud of the life I built. I bought our family home in Smyrna, Georgia, in 1988. Two-bedroom rancher. Peach trees in the backyard. I laid down the hardwood floors myself after the twins were born, Tessa and Jonah. Their tiny footprints are still in the concrete slab behind the garage. That's where they play tag, barefoot, after school while I watch from the porch with their mama, Lorraine. Lorraine passed away in 2009. Breast cancer. It gutted me like a trout. She was my best friend, my compass. She made me softer, kinder. After she died, I poured all I had into the kids. I made every recital, every graduation. When Jonah moved to Colorado and stopped returning my calls, it hurt, but I still had Tessa. She was my sunshine. At least I thought she was. It was a cold December morning when I got the letter. No envelope, just a folded piece of printer paper slipped through my front door. At first, I thought it might be from the HOA. Maybe something about my porch light flickering or the leaves not being raked. But when I unfolded it, I saw her handwriting. I knew it immediately. The same loops and soft cursive I helped her practice in second grade. Dad, please don't take this the wrong way, but we weren't expecting you this Christmas. Things have been complicated with the kids, and Jeremy's parents are already flying in. The house will be full. Maybe we can do something in January instead. Hope you understand. Love, Tessa. I read that letter 6 times. Sat at my dining table with the letter clutched in my shaking hand like it was on fire. We weren't expecting you. My chest tightened like a vice. I'd bought gifts for the grandkids 2 weeks ago, each wrapped with care. A telescope for Mason, her oldest. He's been obsessed with space since last summer when we watched the lunar eclipse together. A baking set for little Ellie. She's 5 and says she wants to be a pastry chef like those TV people. A gift card for Jeremy, her husband, the banker who never once called me dad. I was supposed to drive down on Christmas Eve, stay in their guest room like every year, read the night before Christmas to the grandkids by the fire, wear my Santa hat, drink hot cocoa with Tessa while she played Bing Crosby on her old record player. But this year, they weren't expecting me. I folded the letter and slid into my shirt pocket, walked into the den where the mortgage statements sat in a neat stack beside my recliner. You see, after Lorraine passed, I refinanced the house. Took some equity out to help Tessa and Jeremy when they bought their new home. They had a baby on the way, and I didn't hesitate. Paid off part of their down payment, too. Signed the checks with a smile. 6 years ago, when they hit a rough patch, I co-signed on their mortgage so they wouldn't lose the house. Every month since, I've quietly paid the mortgage. Jeremy lost his job 2 years ago, and I told him not to worry. Family helps family. I said, you do the same for me. But now, they weren't expecting me. I sat there for an hour, thinking about every birthday I never missed, every scraped knee I patched up, every paycheck I split when I needed help. I thought about that time I drove 3 hours through a tornado warning just to bring Ellie her favorite stuffed elephant she forgot during a visit. They weren't expecting me. I stood up slowly. My hip popped. I walked to the phone. I called the bank. Hi, I said to the woman on the line, my voice steady but low. I'd like to cancel the auto payments for a mortgage account I co-signed on. There was a pause. Are you sure, Mr. Aldridge? I looked out the window at the Christmas lights still blinking on my porch, cheerful and clueless. Dead sure, I said. I spent the next few hours pacing. Didn't turn the TV on. Didn't eat lunch. Just thought, what would happen when the next payment bounced? Would Jeremy panic? Would Tessa call? Would they assume it was a mistake? Or would they realize that something had changed? I didn't do it out of spite. I wasn't trying to ruin Christmas. But after a lifetime of giving, maybe it was time to stop filling a cup that never poured back into mine. I pulled out the gifts from the hall closet. The telescope, the baking set, Jeremy's card. I sat on the floor, looked at them for a while. Then I carefully unwrapped each one, took the telescope outside, and set it up in the backyard. Looked up at the stars. It was cold, but peaceful. I didn't cry. Not yet. The next morning, my neighbor, Hank, knocked on my door. Hey, Frank, he said, scratching his beard. Saw your lights on all night. Everything okay? I nodded. Just couldn't sleep. You heading out to your daughter's soon? I paused. No, I said. They've got company. House is full this year. He looked surprised, but didn't pry. Well, if you need company, my wife's making brisket on Christmas. You're welcome anytime. I smiled. Thanks, Hank. As he turned to leave, I felt something shift inside me. A click, like an old lock finally turning after years of rust. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. I didn't raise my daughter to be cold, but maybe I raised her to expect too much of me and never question where it all came from. I taught her how to ride a bike, how to change a tire, how to look people in the eye when she talks. But I never taught her that love isn't a one-way street. That Christmas is more than who gets invited. It's about who made the memories possible. So maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to learn. That evening, I got a phone call. It wasn't Tessa. It was someone else. A voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. And what they told me made my hands tremble worse than that letter ever did. The phone rang at exactly 7:13 p.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table with an open can of Campbell's soup in front of me, too tired to heat it, too stubborn to admit I was hurt. The letter still sat folded on the table, its edges now soft from being handled so much. I wasn't expecting a call. Tessa hadn't called. Jonah sure wouldn't. And I hadn't gotten a telemarketer since I finally got on that do not call list. When I saw the name flash across the caller ID, my breath caught. Marilyn Prescott. I hadn't seen or spoken to Marilyn in almost 11 years. Not since Lorraine's funeral. She was Lorraine's cousin, the wild one in the family, with loud lipstick and louder opinions. We never got along. I always thought she had a bone to pick with me, like she knew something I didn't. I picked up the phone. Hello. There was a pause, then a raspy voice, a little softer than I remembered. Franklin, you still alive, old man? I blinked, caught off guard. Well, barely. Arthritis keeps trying to prove me wrong every morning. What's this about? She didn't chuckle. That worried me. I wasn't sure if I should call, but I heard something and, well, I figured you had a right to know. I straightened in my chair. Heard what? Marilyn hesitated, then exhaled sharply. You're not going to like it, and I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't seen the text myself. I stayed silent, heart thumping. It's about Tessa, she said. Marilyn explained that she'd recently reconnected with Tessa through some charity event in Atlanta. They'd been texting, nothing deep, just catching up, sharing photos of the kids, asking about family. But 2 weeks ago, Marilyn asked if I'd be coming for Christmas. Tessa replied, not realizing who she was talking to. She'd said, verbatim, and I quote, "Nope, haven't invited him in 2 years. He just shows up. Jeremy says he's too depressing to have around the kids. I told him this year we'd finally put her foot down. We'll tell him something gentle. He'll understand." My throat went dry. They hadn't forgotten to invite me. They planned to leave me out. Carefully, intentionally. Marilyn paused on the phone. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself. Tessa used to worship the ground you walked on. I don't know what happened. I stared at the soup in front of me. Thanks for telling me, I said quietly. Then I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my porch with a telescope and a blanket over my lap like an old war veteran who'd just been told his medals were fake. I thought back to all those quiet sacrifices no one ever noticed. When Lorraine died, and I had to learn how to cook overnight, just so Tessa wouldn't eat canned spaghetti every day. The nights I worked overtime to afford her braces. The day I canceled my fishing trip. My first one in years, because Jeremy had been laid off again and they needed money. And now they say I'm depressing? Too sad to be around? Because I talk too much about the past? Because I don't know what TikTok is and I don't drink almond milk? The next morning, I got dressed in my Sunday best. White shirt, brown slacks, the same blazer I wore to Lorraine's memorial. I walked into town, stopping by the courthouse to pull some records. Then I visited the bank. The same young man who always helped me. Jameson, kind smile, hair too long for a banker, welcomed me like usual. Mr. Aldrich, what can I help you with today? I need to make a few adjustments to my accounts. We sat down in his glass-walled office. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were statements, contracts, a power of attorney I still had from when Tessa and Jeremy were financially struggling. Documents proving I was still co-signer and partial owner on their home. Jameson looked through the pages and raised an eyebrow. You want to revoke the auto pay? Already did, I said. Now I want to restructure the agreement. He blinked. You want to take full responsibility for the loan? No, I said, voice steady. I want to take full ownership of the house. He stared at me. That'll default their mortgage. I know, but you, sir, they'll lose their home. I nodded, slow and sure. Not if they can afford to keep it on their own. But if they can't, well, maybe it's time they learn what responsibility really looks like. Later that evening, I visited an old friend, Doug Holloway. Doug used to work with me in the lineman crew back in the 80s. Now he runs a small property firm, flipping homes and managing rentals. I handed him the documents, explained the situation, and asked if he'd be willing to handle it if things turned ugly. Doug scratched his head, sighed, then looked me dead in the eye. I've seen you crawl into electrical towers and ice storms for strangers. I know you ain't cruel. So whatever this is, Frank, you're doing it for a reason. I nodded. I'm not out for revenge. Just balance. 3 days passed. No call from Tessa. No text. No apology. But I did get something in the mail. A Merry Christmas card. Stock photo of a family I didn't recognize, probably printed at Walgreens. Inside, wishing you peace and warmth this season. Love, Tessa, Jeremy, Mason, and Ellie. I sat on the porch with the card in my hand. Peace and warmth? I guess I wasn't worthy of that in person, just in ink. I went inside and placed the card next to the now empty boxes where the grandkids' gifts once were. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Another unexpected call. This time it was from Jonah. I hadn't heard from him in years. He left for Boulder after college, chasing some tech dream. Only time I saw him was twice. Once at Lorraine's funeral, and once when he flew in for Tessa's baby shower. We didn't talk much either time. Dad, his voice cracked. Hey, you got a minute? I was quiet. Sure. What's going on? He took a breath. I heard about what happened. About Tessa. I froze. You talked to her? No. Marilyn called me. Said you might need someone to talk to. I felt my throat tighten. Jonah hadn't called in a decade. And now he was on the line like we spoke every Sunday. I don't know why I stayed away so long, he said. I was selfish and stupid. And I figured you always had Tessa, so maybe I didn't matter much. My heart clenched. That's not true, I said. You've always mattered. I just didn't know how to reach you. There was a pause on the line. Then he said something that I didn't expect. Can I come home for Christmas? I looked out the window. The peach trees were bare. The driveway was empty. The house was quiet. But maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to stay that way. Yeah, I said, voice trembling. Yes, son. Come home. And this time, I'll be expecting you. Jonah arrived on December 23rd. I heard the car before I saw it, rattling down the gravel road like it needed a new muffler and a prayer. I stepped onto the porch just in time to see him step out. He looked older than I remembered, beard a little scraggly, like he hadn't shaved in a week. Thin frame, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. But his eyes? Still the same sharp green as his mama's. He didn't say a word at first. Neither did I. We just stood there, two stubborn men who let time get in the way of love. Then he walked up the porch steps and hugged me. I hadn't been hugged like that in years. Sorry it took me so long, he whispered. I patted his back. You're here now. That's what counts. We sat by the fireplace that night, sharing stories like we were trying to patch holes in an old quilt. He told me about Boulder, how the startup he joined fell apart, how he now worked part-time fixing computers in a library. I always thought I'd be rich by 30, he said with a crooked grin. Turns out, happiness is cheaper than I thought. I chuckled, sipped my cocoa. Your mama used to say something similar. If we can laugh, eat, and sleep under a roof, we're better off than most. Jonah nodded. You miss her? I looked into the fire. Every day. On Christmas Eve, we decorated the tree. It was a bit crooked. One of the legs on the stand was busted, but we made it work. Jonah hung the star like he did when he was 10, standing on the same squeaky dining chair that Lorraine always warned him not to break. We cooked dinner together, burning the ham a little, but laughing so hard it didn't matter. I pulled out the telescope after dinner. Jonah and I stood under the stars, just like old times, like nothing had changed, even though everything had. He looked through the scope, adjusted the lens. Still works, he said. I nodded. Some things do, if you take care of them. Around 9 p.m., my phone lit up. Tessa. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the green button. Jonah looked at me. You gonna answer? I shook my head. Not tonight. I'll let it ring. Christmas morning arrived with a soft hush of snow. Unusual for Georgia, but beautiful. Like a fresh start. Jonah woke up early and made pancakes. Burned the first batch, of course. We exchanged small gifts. He gave me a pocket knife engraved with "Still Your Son." I gave him my father's old watch. We ate breakfast in silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty. Then, around noon, it happened. The knock. 3 soft taps at the door. I opened it to find Tessa standing there, holding a tin of cookies, eyes red-rimmed, cheeks pale. "Dad," she said, "can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Behind her, Jeremy sat in their SUV, staring straight ahead, not getting out. The kids weren't with them. I stepped aside. Tessa walked in, looking around like she was afraid the house might reject her too. Jonah stood in the kitchen, arms folded. He didn't say a word. Tessa sat on the couch. "I'm sorry," she started, but I raised my hand. "Before you apologize, let me ask you something." She nodded, eyes wide. "Did you mean what you said to Marilyn? About me being too depressing? Did I just show up uninvited?" Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't mean it like that." Jeremy said it, and I was just venting. I nodded slowly. "You said it more than once." She blinked fast. "I didn't think you'd ever hear it. That's the problem. Tessa, you thought I wouldn't." She started crying. I didn't know how to tell you no. Every year, we'd fight about it. Jeremy said you take over the house, that you make everyone talk about Mom and cry. He said it's too heavy for the kids. "And you?" I asked softly. "What did you think?" She wiped her eyes. "I think I was selfish. I wanted a light Christmas. No grief. No reminders. Just joy. And you thought I couldn't give you that." She didn't answer. I sat down across from her. "I gave you everything I had, Tessa. Not just money. Time. Memories. Support. When Jeremy lost his job, who covered your mortgage?" She whispered, "You did." I leaned in slightly. "Do you know what happens now that I've canceled the payments?" She looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "I stopped paying, and I'm invoking my ownership rights. The house is in my name, too. I gave you 6 years of support and got a letter in return. This is me drawing the line." Her mouth fell open. "You're taking our home?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm giving you the chance to keep it on your own, like adults." Tessa sat in stunned silence. Jonah finally spoke. "I stayed away because I thought Dad didn't need me. You made it seem like he was always with you, that you two were close. But I see now he was just convenient. Until he wasn't." Tessa turned to him. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Jonah said. "You asked him not to come for Christmas. But now that the house is at risk, suddenly you're here." She stood up, voice rising. "That's not why I came." "Then why?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "Because I felt awful." I read the letter again and realized how cruel it was. "I didn't expect Marilyn to tell you. I didn't expect you to cut us off. I didn't expect Jonah to show up." She looked down. "I didn't expect any of this." I stood up and walked to the window. Snowflakes danced across the yard. The peach trees shimmered in white. "Tessa," I said, "I'll always love you. You're my daughter. But love without respect is hollow." She sniffled. "If you want to repair this, it starts with honesty. And effort. Not cookies." She nodded slowly. "I understand." That night, Tessa left. She didn't ask for the house back. She didn't argue. She said she'd call after the new year. And when she walked out that door, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, but also at peace. Jonah and I sat by the fire again, just like we did 2 nights before. "What are you going to do with the house if she can't keep it?" he asked. I stared into the flames. "I don't know yet. Maybe sell it. Maybe rent it. Maybe move in and let it be a second chance." "For who?" I looked at him. "For us." 3 days after Christmas, a certified letter arrived. It wasn't from Tessa. It was from a lawyer representing Jeremy's parents. And what it said made everything so much more complicated. 3 days after Christmas, the mail came late. I was sitting at the dining table with Jonah, going over old photo albums. We were halfway through the one labeled 9701, Tessa's braces and Jonah's mushroom haircut, when I heard the mail truck cough at the curb. Jonah offered to grab it, but I waved him off. I needed the fresh air. The snow had started to melt in patches, leaving muddy edges along the front walkway. I shuffled to the mailbox in my boots and opened a small metal door. Bills, junk mail, grocery flyer, and then one envelope. Thick, official looking. Return address, Whitmore and Denton, attorneys at law. Atlanta. I froze. Whitmore and Denton weren't strangers. They were the same firm Jeremy's parents used when they sued the HOA back in 2015 over a fence dispute. My heart thudded. I walked back inside, envelope in hand, and sat back at the table. Jonah looked up. "What's that?" "A headache," I muttered. I opened the letter slowly. Inside were 3 neatly typed pages, cold and clean. To Mr. Franklin Aldridge. This letter serves as official notice on behalf of our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Theodore and Camille Hensley, regarding the property located at 112 Chandler Court, Atlanta, Georgia, currently under shared financial ownership and mortgage agreement with your daughter, Tessa Hensley, née Aldridge, and her spouse, Jeremy Hensley. Our clients wish to assert their financial contribution toward the ongoing renovation and maintenance of the property in question over the past 6 years. As such, they are requesting recognition as equitable stakeholders should the property be considered for forfeiture, transfer, or sale due to mortgage disruption. Please consider this an initial step toward a formal petition for restitution or stake division if voluntary negotiation is not undertaken. Respectfully, Samuel J. Denton, Esq. I read it twice, 3 times, then set it down gently. "They want a piece of the house," I said. Jonah leaned over, reading the first page. "On what grounds?" "They say they help pay for renovations," which, to be fair, they might have. Jeremy mentioned once they help pay for the kitchen remodel. But legally, the deed's between me, Tessa, and Jeremy. Jonah scoffed. "So now Jeremy's parents want a cut of your kindness?" I rubbed my temples. "Looks that way." The silence that followed was heavy. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. This house, this structure of drywall and dreams, had become a symbol of something bigger. Something I hadn't realized until now. It wasn't just about bricks and wood. It was about control, about memory, about who gets to decide what family looks like when the kids grow up and forget who built the foundation beneath their feet. Later that night, I called Doug Holloway, told him about the letter. He asked for a scanned copy, promised to have his team look over the legal threats. "You didn't do anything wrong, Frank," he said. "They're just trying to scare you into walking away." Well, I sighed. They picked the wrong old man for that. Jonah and I spent the evening making a list, every receipt, wire transfer, and email I still had about the house. We found the cosigner form I'd filed in 2017, the cash gift declaration from the down payment, even the note Jeremy wrote thanking me. "We couldn't have done this without you, Pops." Jonah shook his head. "Funny how people forget the good you did the minute it's not convenient." I nodded. "That's why we write things down. Memories fade, but paper don't lie." The next day, my phone rang again. Tessa. I answered this time. Her voice was small. "Dad, did you get a letter?" "Yes." I didn't know they were doing that. I swear. Jeremy must have told them about the mortgage issue, and they just reacted. "You didn't tell them?" "No. I didn't want them involved. But you also didn't stop them." Silence. She sighed. "I didn't think it would go this far." I felt something twist inside me, grief, maybe, or the slow, cold reality of who my daughter had become. "I offered you a chance to fix things, Tess." Quietly, respectfully. "I know," she whispered. "Now it's not just family. It's courtrooms and contracts. And once you let the lawyers in, the heart leaves the room." After I hung up, I stared out the window for a long time. Jonah came and stood beside me. "You still thinking about walking away?" I shook my head. "No, I'm thinking about standing still for once, holding my ground. Would you like Chapter 5 continued with another 1,000? Doug called me early the next morning. His tone was calm, but serious. "They've got no legal footing," he said. "Jeremy's parents never appeared on any mortgage or deed. Any money they gave was either a gift or undocumented help. So they're bluffing? They're rattling the fence, hoping you'll open the gate." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I stared at the peach trees out my back window, bare, brittle, but still standing. "I want to fight," I said. Jonah drove with me into Atlanta that afternoon. We met Doug at a small office near Marietta Street. Not some marble floor law firm with shiny elevators. Just a one-story building with a flickering open sign in the window and the smell of old books inside. Doug slid the legal packet across his desk. We're going to respond officially. A cease and desist for harassment. And we'll include documentation that proves you've carried the financial weight since day one. He glanced at Jonah. And if this goes to court, Jonah didn't even blink. I'll testify. I'll tell the judge how you supported both of them for years. How they've treated him like a checkbook with legs. I gave him a side glance. You sure about that? He smiled. Dad, I think it's about time I stood up for the man who never stopped standing for us. Back at home, I found myself walking the hallway with a heavy heart. Every photo frame, every nail in the wall, every dent in the baseboard carried a piece of our family history. It was more than a house. It was a museum of my love, my sacrifices, and yet the very people I built it for were now fighting to push me out of the picture. I opened the bottom drawer of the hallway dresser. Inside was Lorraine's Bible, old, leather-bound, pages worn thin from years of quiet reading. A photo slipped out as I pulled it free. It was from Christmas, 1998. Lorraine on the couch, smiling with a mug of cocoa. Tessa curled next to her. Jonah on the floor in his Buzz Lightyear pajamas. And me, standing behind them, hands on both their shoulders. I stared at it for a long while. Then I placed it on the mantel. That night, Tessa texted again. Dad, can we meet? Just you and me? I stared at the message for nearly 10 minutes. Then I replied, tomorrow, 2 p.m., at the Peach Grove. The next day, I drove out to the family plot of land just outside of Kennesaw. It used to be my father's before he passed. The Peach Grove had long since thinned out, but the old bench under the oak tree still stood. Tessa arrived late, bundled in a gray coat, face pale from winter wind or guilt, maybe both. She sat beside me, not too close. I didn't want it to turn into this, she said, staring at her hands. But it did, I said. Jeremy's parents are overstepping. I didn't ask them to send anything. But you let them. She flinched. I didn't know how to stop them. I turned toward her. That's the difference between us, Tessa. I spent my whole life learning how to stand up. For you, your brother, your mother. And now, when it's your turn, she didn't meet my eyes. I made mistakes, she said softly. I let comfort guide me instead of loyalty. I let Jeremy's opinions become my voice. And what do you think? I asked. About me. About the house. About all of it. She hesitated. I think I forgot who you were. Or maybe I took for granted that you'd always be there, no matter how I treated you. That landed harder than anything she could have said. Because it was true. We sat in silence for a long while. Then she pulled out an envelope from her coat pocket. This is a check, she said, for 3 months of mortgage. From me. Not Jeremy. Not his parents. Me. I looked at it. I'm not asking for the house back, she said. I'm asking for your trust, bit by bit. However long it takes. I didn't reach for the envelope. Not yet. I don't need your money, I said gently. She nodded. I know. That's why I brought it. By the time we stood up, the sun was dipping low behind the trees. We didn't hug. Not yet. But before she walked her car, I called after her. Tessa. She turned. You forgot how to be a daughter. But I never forgot how to be your father. Her eyes filled. I know, she whispered. The first real thaw came 2 days after the new year. Snow turned to slush. Sidewalks cleared. Porch railings dripped slowly in the sun like the house was crying warm tears. I stood on my front step in my boots and thick sweater, staring out at the street, watching a red cardinal flutter from branch to branch in the peach tree. Jonah came out with 2 mugs of coffee. His beard had gotten a trim. He looked better, lighter. Looks like she meant what she said, he said, handing me a mug. I followed his eyes. A small white envelope sat in the mailbox, another payment from Tessa. 3rd in a row. I hadn't cashed the first 2 yet. They sat in a drawer next to Lorraine's Bible. I was still deciding whether this was trust or guilt. Jonah nudged my elbow. You know, she could have ignored everything. Lawyered up. Let Jeremy's folks escalate it. She still might. I muttered, sipping the coffee. Jonah raised an eyebrow. You really think she's playing a long game? I shrugged. I I don't know what to think. Truth is, a man gets used to disappointment after a while. It comes in waves, sometimes slow and quiet, sometimes all at once. I just didn't know if this wave had finally passed or was pulling back to hit harder. Later that day, I found myself back in the garage. It still smelled like motor oil and old pine. A box of Christmas decorations sat half open near the workbench. I had never put them back after that letter from Tessa ruined the season. I lifted the string of lights, one bulb cracked. I sighed. Jonah walked in and saw me holding it. You know, he said, we could always do a second Christmas. Just us. Late? Sure, but better late than never. I chuckled. You want me to pretend it's still December? Why not? He shrugged. We already missed the real thing. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the kid I used to tuck in every night, the one who used to fall asleep with a flashlight under the covers and a National Geographic on his chest. Now here he was, 35 years old, pitching a do-over like we were kids playing house. All right, I said, smiling faintly. Let's do it. 2 days later, we made it happen. Jonah set up the tree again, this time in the den instead of the living room. Said it felt cozier. I reheated a frozen ham I'd meant to serve weeks ago. Made deviled eggs the way Lorraine used to. Extra mustard. A sprinkle of paprika on top. Jonah wrapped a few gifts in newspaper. I gave him a pair of work gloves and a thermos with his initials carved in. He gave me a set of binoculars. For bird watching, he said, since you're officially boring now. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. The night ended with us sitting on the porch, mugs of cocoa in hand, wrapped in quilts, watching the moon rise over the trees. I've been thinking, Jonas said. That's dangerous. He smirked. I might stay a while longer. Maybe find work around here. Help out. I raised an eyebrow. You sure? Not much tech demand in Smyrna. Maybe, he said. But there's demand for sons who've got making up to do. I swallowed hard. Son, I said, voice low, you're already doing it. The next morning, I got another letter. But this time, it wasn't from a lawyer. It was handwritten. No envelope. Just a folded note tucked under the doormat. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Jeremy. Frank. I didn't know how to face you after everything. I didn't agree with how Tessa handled it. I didn't handle it well either. I felt threatened by you. Always have. You built so much with so little. And I've never been able to match that. I said things I regret. Told Tessa you were dragging us down with stories of the past. When really, I was just insecure about my own failures. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just honesty. I'm going to talk to my parents. Ask them to back off. This house should never have become a battlefield. I hope, one day, you'll see me as more than the man who married your daughter. Jeremy. I stood on the porch, staring at that note until the cold started biting through my socks. Then I went inside, folded the letter, and placed it next to the 3 uncashed checks from Tessa. Maybe there was hope yet. Not a full restoration. Not a Christmas miracle. But something better. The beginning of repairs. January moved slow, like syrup down a cold plate. The air was still sharp enough to sting your cheeks, but not enough to keep Jonah indoors. He was busy most mornings clearing gutters, fixing the back fence, and patching up that leaky spot in the garage roof I've been ignoring since October. I might as well earn my keep, he'd say every time I offered to pay him for the help. I didn't argue, just watched from the porch, grateful for the sound of tools again in this quiet house. But inside me, the weight of everything lingered. Tessa's betrayal, Jeremy's letter, the threat from his parents, and the slow shift in our family's center of gravity. I decided it was time to talk to my lawyer. Not Doug the house guy, but Miriam Galloway, my estate attorney since Lorraine passed. I scheduled a meeting and drove myself there. Miriam was a no-nonsense woman with silver hair, thick glasses, and a sharper brain than anyone twice her age. She greeted me with a warm nod, then got straight to business. I read the cease and desist Doug's team sent. Nicely handled. Now, what's next, Frank? I leaned forward. I want to secure everything. The house, my accounts, even the truck. I want a will that reflects what's real now. Not what used to be. She tilted her head. You thinking about excluding someone? I hesitated. Not out of anger. Just clarity. She nodded slowly. I understand. You don't want to reward behavior that took you for granted. That's right. And Jonah? I smiled. He came home. He stayed. and he never asked for a thing. We spent an hour going over options. She drafted a living trust with Jonah as co-beneficiary, added conditions around the property in Atlanta, and gave me the paperwork to review at home. As I stood to leave, she said something that stuck with me. Families heal, Frank, but legal protections aren't punishment. They're peace of mind. I carried that peace all the way home. That night, Tessa called again. Her voice was steadier this time. I heard from Jeremy, she said. He told me about the letter he left. I didn't say anything. I wanted you to know we've had some hard conversations. About everything. About you. About the mortgage. About how we've treated you. She took a breath. I was wrong. I let convenience speak louder than conscience. I made you feel like you were just background noise. And I swear to God, Dad, I never meant for it to turn into war. It wasn't war, I said quietly. It was a wake-up call. I know, and I've been awake ever since. She told me Jeremy had talked to his parents, told them to drop it, that the house was none of their business. And if they don't stop, I asked, we'll get a new lawyer, one that defends you this time. That surprised me, but I didn't show it. We're not asking for favors, she continued. We just want to start again, if there's still room. There was a pause between us. Then I said, come to dinner, you and the kids. She exhaled hard, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. You sure? Yeah, I said, but no gifts, no cards. Just come hungry. The next Sunday, they arrived. Jeremy came in sheepish, holding a pie he clearly hadn't baked himself. Tessa wore her hair back like Lorraine used to, and the kids ran and shouting Grandpa, like they'd never been away. It was awkward at first, quiet, a few stilted jokes, 4 smiles. But then Mason found Jonah's old baseball glove in the garage, and Ellie asked for hot cocoa, and suddenly the house felt lived in again. Jonah came in midway through dinner and didn't hide his surprise at the guests. But he sat, he stayed, and when Ellie crawled onto his lap to show him her painted nails, he smiled. That smile said everything. After dinner, Tessa helped clear the plates while Jeremy and Jonah tossed a football in the yard with Mason. I know I can't erase the letter, she said, voice low. You don't have to, I said. You just have to prove it wasn't the final chapter. She turned toward me, eyes glistening. Thank you for giving me that chance. I'm not doing it for free, I said, trying to smile. I expect a pie every Sunday. She laughed, genuinely this time. Deal. That night, after they'd all gone home, Jonah and I sat in the den. You really okay with all this? He asked. I thought for a while. I don't know if I trust everything yet, but I believe in trying. And maybe that's enough. He nodded. By the way, I added, you're staying in the will. He raised an eyebrow. Was I ever out of it? No, I said, smiling. But now you're at the top. By mid-January, the rhythm of the house had changed. There were more voices again. Small footsteps, high-pitched giggles from the grandkids, the creak of the back screen door opening and closing every few hours. I found chocolate wrappers in the couch cushions and crayon scribbles on a notepad I kept by the phone. I didn't mind. Not one bit. The silence I'd grown used to have been replaced by life again. But life, even good life, comes with questions. And mine hit me hard one Thursday morning when I sat across from Jonah at the kitchen table, the little folder between us. You sure about this, Dad? He asked. He wasn't talking about dinner or decorations. He was talking about Tessa, about the clause we'd added after the cease and desist. I took a deep breath and folded my hands. She's my daughter, but that doesn't mean I owe her everything. Jonah nodded, but his eyes were cautious. I know, but you also said you believed in trying. If you're going to let her back in your life, shouldn't the trust reflect that? I leaned back in my chair. The old wood creaked under me. It will, eventually, but not all at once. That weekend, Tessa came by again, this time alone. No kids, no Jeremy, just her in a heavy winter coat and that nervous smile I remembered from when she was 8 and broke her mother's favorite vase. She came to talk about the house, about the family, about the mess we were all still slowly crawling out of. I read your note, Dad, she said, sliding a copy of the will across the table. Jonah showed me, said you wanted me to see it. I watched her carefully. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. She nodded. I get it. Honestly, I do. I raised an eyebrow. You do? She looked up. You're not punishing me. You're protecting yourself. I was surprised she understood it so plainly. I'm trying to rebuild trust, I said. But trust isn't built in a day. It's built in details. In showing up, not just apologizing. She nodded again. Then let me earn it. We sat together for over an hour that day, talking like grown-ups, like two people trying to meet in the middle of a very long bridge. I told her about Lorraine's last words, how she made me promise I'd never let the family fall apart. She told me about the pressure she felt being the good kid for so long. The one who stayed close, married young, did everything right. Until it started to feel like she'd inherited my expectations more than my love. That part stung, but maybe it was true. And maybe some of the things I thought were love had, over time, turned into control disguised as care. A week later, Jeremy stopped by, alone this time too. He didn't come in, just stood on the porch with a folded paper in his hand. I paid your property taxes, he said. I blinked. What? I know you always cover them. Quietly. Every year. I figured it was time I started stepping up. He handed me the receipt. I'm not trying to win points. I just want to take responsibility. I looked at him hard. Really hard. He looked tired, but not fake tired. Trying tired. I nodded. Thanks, Jeremy. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. That caught me off guard. You were right about some things too, I admitted. He glanced over his shoulder. I was afraid of your shadow. Turns out, I should have been trying to stand in it. That night, I lit a fire and sat with Jonah. You think we're actually going to come out of this better? I asked. He stirred his cocoa and shrugged. I think we already are. How so? He smiled. Because no one's pretending anymore. And that's always the start of healing. Later, I stood at the window. Snowflakes had started again. Just a soft flutter, not heavy enough to stick. The peach trees swayed slightly in the wind. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a man standing alone. I felt like the roof had finally stopped leaking. Not because I patched it, but because someone finally offered to help hold it up. By February, the house didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like a home again. Not the kind filled with perfection. No, there were still cracks in the drywall, uneven floorboards, and memories that stung when I walked down certain hallways. But there was warmth now. Real warmth. Not just from the old furnace, but from something human. Something hopeful. Tessa brought the kids by every Sunday, without fail. Not to make things right in some performative way, but just to be there, to help, to listen, to learn again how to be a daughter, not just a grown woman with guilt in her pockets. Jeremy stopped coming with them at first. He said he wanted to give me space, which I respected. But I also noticed he sent along pie or groceries every week. Little gestures. Even gestures take courage when you're ashamed. Jonah, meanwhile, had unofficially moved in. He said he'd only stay for a little while, but I noticed he started forwarding his mail to my address. Then he put up hooks for his coat. Then he started organizing my shed. I figured if I'm going to be the one mowing the lawn now, I might as well know where the damn oil can is, he joked. I didn't argue. Truth is, I hadn't realized how much I missed having him under my roof. Hearing his boots on the stairs. The sound of his laugh echoing in the kitchen. The occasional deep, thoughtful conversation when we couldn't sleep and sat by the fire until morning. We were repairing more than just trust. We were repairing us. But even as things began to heal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. Something was still hanging in the air, unspoken. I found it one afternoon while sorting through an old chest in the attic. Inside, Lorraine's journals, wrapped in a faded quilt, untouched since she passed. I carried them downstairs like treasure. Jonah watched me set them on the kitchen table. You sure about this? He asked. No, I said honestly. But maybe it's time. That night, I sat by the fire and opened the first one. It was dated 10 months before Lorraine died. Page after page filled with her neat handwriting, soft and slanted, like the breeze of a calm afternoon. She wrote about the house, about me, about the kids. One entry stood out. Frank worries he's holding on too tight to the kids, but it's only because he's afraid they'll forget how much he gave. I wish they could see him the way I do, not as a protector or provider, but as a man with a quiet ache in his heart. A man who just wants to matter after everything's said and done. That undid me. I closed the book and stared into the fire. Jonah noticed my silence. "You okay?" She saw me, I said, even when I didn't know I was fading. The next morning, I called Tessa, asked her to come by. Alone, she arrived in the afternoon, wearing that same nervous expression, half apology, half hope. We sat on the back porch. No coffee, no distractions. I handed her one of Lorraine's journals. "She wrote about you a lot," I said, "not just as a mother, but as a woman watching another woman grow." Tessa opened it slowly. "Read a few lines." Her hand covered her mouth. "She never showed me these. She never showed anyone," I said. I think she was waiting for the right time. Tessa looked up, eyes full. "Is this the right time?" I nodded. "Because I see you now, too. Not just as my daughter, but as a woman who's trying." We talked for hours after that. About Lorraine. About the times I could have listened better. About the times Tessa needed me, but didn't know how to ask. We didn't solve every issue, but we pulled the stitches tight around the wounds. Not to hide them, but to help them heal. The next day, I called Miriam again. Told her to amend the will. Not to remove Jonah from the top, but to include Tessa again under new terms. Add a clause, I said. Something simple. She asked me what I had in mind. I thought for a long moment, then replied, "Inheritance shall follow integrity." That Sunday, the whole family came by, Jeremy included. The house was loud again, full of laughter, spilled lemonade, and toy cars underfoot. Mason asked if he could build a fort in the living room. Ellie danced to music no one else could hear. Jonah grilled burgers in the backyard like it was the 4th of July. And me? I just sat in my recliner, listening, watching, feeling the pieces come together. Not perfectly, but honestly. I looked at the walls of this old house, scuffed, cracked, layered with memories. And for the first time since Christmas, I realized something. This house didn't betray me. It held me. It held every version of me. The young father, the grieving husband, the angry old man, and now, the man who forgave but not without cost. Because forgiveness isn't free. It takes tears, and time, and boundaries, but it also gives back something priceless. Peace. It snowed softly the morning everything finally felt settled. Not a storm, just a gentle dusting. Enough to make the rooftops shimmer, enough to hush the world for a moment. I stood at the front window, wrapped in Lorraine's shawl, cocoa in hand, watching the flakes fall like peace itself. The house was quiet, but no longer lonely. Jonah snored faintly in the guest room. There were small handprints on the hallway walls. Laughter echoes still lingering from last Sunday's visit. It finally felt like a home again. Not just walls and memories, but a living, breathing place full of grace. I'd spent months fixing broken things. Not just pipes or gutters, but relationships. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to hold everything together with grit and guilt. I'd let go, let others step in, let healing take its time. That afternoon, I called everyone to the living room. Tessa, Jeremy, Jonah, even the grandkids. I held up the envelope. My will's been updated. I told them. This house, this land, and the story tied to them aren't just mine anymore. They belong to the ones who showed up when it counted. I looked to Jonah. You're still the executor. You've stood beside me in the storm. Then to Tessa. You're back in the trust. Not because of an apology, but because you came home with honesty. Finally, to Jeremy. You admitted where you fell short. That takes strength. I respect that now. Tears shimmered in Tessa's eyes. Jonah gave me a quiet nod. And for the first time, Jeremy didn't shrink. He stood tall. Later, as the sun set, we all ended up on the porch. Ellie built a tiny snowman near the steps, while Mason chased Jonah with a snowball. Tessa sat beside me and whispered, "I almost lost you." I didn't reply right away. Then I said, "You didn't. You just had to find your way back." She reached for my hand. "I'm still finding it," she whispered. "That's all right," I said. "So am I." Weeks passed. Snow melted. Buds appeared on the trees. Jonah fixed the truck. Tessa started volunteering. Jeremy brought over groceries without saying a word. Me? I started planting again. Peaches, of course. Same grove my father once tended. Same soil Lorraine used to bless every spring. And I thought, maybe that's the lesson. Families break. Seasons change. But with patience, with truth, with just enough love. Even winter softens.